to make a strong tension in order to maintain the path of its own falling. This tension provokes the tension of the suns of the neighboring systems, among the number of which is the system Ors. And when the sun Ors strains itself not to change its path from falling inherent to it, this sun Ors, in its turn, provokes the same tension on all the concentrations of its own system, among which is also the planet Earth. The tension in all the planets acts also on the common presences of all beings arising and breeding on them, always engendering in the beings, besides desires and intentions in which they are not aware, the feeling called sacred Yabuliu Nosar, or as your favorites would say, the feeling of religiousness, namely that being feeling which at times appears in the desire and striving for, as I've already said, speedier self-perfecting in the sense of objective reason. It is interesting that when this sacred feeling, or another similar to it, which was also engendered by a certain common cosmic actualization, proceeds in the common presences of your favorites, then they accept it as a symptom of certain of their numerous diseases. And in the given case, for example, they call this feeling nerves. It is necessary to remark that such an impulse inherent in the presence of all three-brained beings of our great universe formerly arose and became actualized almost normally in the majority of terrestrial beings of that time, namely from the time of the removal of the organ Kundabuffer from the common presences of the three-brained beings of the planet Earth, right up to the second Transapalnian perturbation. But later, among the number of chief evils which flow from the conditions of ordinary being existence established by them themselves, especially when in the presences of every terrestrial three-brained being there began to become predominant the evil inner god of theirs I mentioned, named their self-calming, then it occurred that in them, under the influence of the action of Soliunensius, instead of the desire and striving for a speedier self-perfection, a something began to arise such as they themselves characterize by the words need of freedom, which chiefly serves the cause of the arising there of these same grievous processes of theirs, similar to this last Bolshevism. I will explain to you somewhat later how they represent to themselves this famous freedom of theirs. And now, I will only tell you that that feeling which arises from the action of Soliunensius strengthens in them the need for some or other general change in the conditions of their ordinary external being existence, which until this was somehow in them. After the second Transalpalnian perturbation to this ill-starred planet of yours, that is, after the loss of Atlantis, the action of the cosmic law Soliunensius in the general presences of these favorites of yours was actualized at least 40 times, and almost from the very beginning, each time, thanks already to this strange need for freedom, which has since been fixed in the majority of them, almost the same proceeded as in recent years still proceeds on that part of the surface of your planet on which the totality of the existing groups is called Russia. Here it is extremely important also to notice that the existence itself of these terrifying processes could not in any way take place there among the three-brained beings of the planet Earth if those data, which had remained intact in their subconsciousness for the engendering of the being impulse conscience, to which data the most saintly Ashiata Shiyamash was the first to turn his attention, and upon which he relied for the fulfillment of his mission. had taken part in the functioning of that consciousness of theirs which has become habitual for them during their waking state, only in consequence of the fact that the data for the sacred impulse of being conscious do not take part in the function of this consciousness of theirs, the actions of the law solunensius, just as well as of other inevitable cosmic laws, are molded into such abnormal and for themselves pitiable forms. Although the whole totality of causes serves as the sources for the arising of the second factor, yet in my opinion, the basic cause also in the given case is nevertheless this fact, that their famous subdivision into castes becomes established among them regarding their mutual relationship among themselves, which subdivision has constantly existed there with the exception only of that period when there was definitely rooted among them the results of the most saintly labors of Ashiata Shiyamash. The difference is only in this, that in the former centuries, the division into different castes proceeded from the consciousness and intention of several separate individuals there, while now this proceeds quite automatically without the participation of anyone's will or anyone's consciousness. Now, my boy, I find it opportune to explain to you a little about this, namely, in what way and in what gradations these favorites of yours became automatically sorted out from their different celebrated castes, and how they later already began to subdivide themselves into these castes, when, according to various chance circumstances, and wherever significant groups of them became concentrated and they exist together, then several of them, in whom firstly, for some reason or other, the consequences of the properties of the organ Kundabuffer had been previously well crystallized, the totality of which crystallizations in general gives to their common presences the impulses for what is called cunning, and secondly, in whose hands at the given time there appear for some reason or other many different what are called terrifying means, or what they themselves call weapons, quickly set themselves apart from other beings, and putting themselves at their head, constitute the beginnings of what are called the ruling class. And further, since all the three-brained beings of the planet Earth, and particularly of recent periods, the sacred being impulse called conscience does not take part in the functioning of their general consciousness, in consequence of which in them there is absent even the very need for making any conscious being effort at all, then they, that is, the beings who had set themselves apart and who had assigned themselves to the ruling class, profiting by the said terrifying means, compel other beings of the given groupings to produce for them even those efforts which every being should inevitably actualize in ordinary being existence, and other beings of these groupings also not wishing for the same reason personally to produce these being efforts, no, not even for others, and at the same time being afraid of the mentioned terrifying means of the beings of the ruling class, begin to have recourse to all kinds of cunning in order that, as is said there, to load on one another's backs such being efforts as are inevitably required for the beings of the ruling class. And as a result, the beings of every such grouping usually sort themselves out gradually and fall into diverse categories according to the degree of skill, of their artfulness. And so, from the division of the beings into categories of this kind, there just begins in the following generations a subdivision and an assigning of each other into these famous castes of theirs. From this assigning of each other into castes of diverse kinds, there is already by itself infallibly crystallized in the common presence of each of them in relation to the